There are currently 40 companies on the ASX right now that have a dividend yield of over 10%. 5 of them are over 20%, and one of them is over 50% dividend yield. Can you imagine getting half your investment back within the first year of investing in that company? It's crazy. So let's have a look at them just for fun. Yes, I know I still need artwork for the walls. They're very bare. I'm getting to it. Now, I'm sure most of you know this, but the companies that I'm going to show in this video, I'm just showing because they have crazy high dividend yields. And I just wanted to show them to you. I am not recommending any of these companies because, of course, you know we need to do further research if we're ever going to consider our company for our own portfolios. So I thought we'd look at the top 10 highest dividend yields on the ASX right now, just to get an idea of what sort of companies are paying these crazy dividends. Let's go. This was the list I got when I first searched for the highest dividends through CommSec. I then took the top 10 of these to make this video, but I didn't film the research part until 3 days later, and it was crazy how much the yields had changed in just that short time frame. So let's go and have a look at them. So at number 10, we have QRE, Beta Shares Australian Resources Sector ETF. A lot of these are actually probably going to be ETFs, so keep that in mind. So this ETF tracks the resources sector, as it says by the name. Let's have a look at the distributions or the dividends, see how consistent they've been. Not that consistent, although they are pretty high. And if we go into Google, have a look at over the last 5 years, they've actually increased by about 30%, so that's good. This actually seems like a pretty decent ETF if you're looking for something in the resources sector that's very niche and it's got a high dividend yield. Let's look at the next one. Okay, the next one is Gear, which I actually do know a bit about. It's a hedged fund, probably why the dividends are so high. So let's go and have a look at that. The dividends look, they're okay. They're fairly consistent, not too bad, probably a little bit higher recently. If we go and look at what they actually invest in, it's the ASX 200. Let's have a look at the last 5 years and see if it's increased in price. So the last 5 years, it's increased about 5%, so it hasn't done that great. It seemed to dip quite a lot in 2020, which kind of makes sense. Over the last, say, 12 months, it's been pretty stagnant, hasn't done much in terms of price growth. But that dividend yield or distribution yield is pretty high, so that's not too bad. So let's go and have a look at the next one. So let's do FSF next. So it's a New Zealand trust. Their dividends have been recently really high, but generally not as high over the long term. So keep that in mind. It's just been recently quite high and probably that won't stick, but a high 16.4 dividend yield at the moment as of recording this. But it's been pretty high before that anyway. It looks around the 8-9% previous to that. Let's have a look at how much it's grown over the last 5 years. It's actually decreased. It's gone down by 36.85%, even though you're getting a high dividend yield now. And that's probably the case because the price has fallen, so the yield looks artificially high. It is falling in price, so you would lose on the capital growth on that one. The next one in 8th place is ABG from the Abacus group. Let's go and have a look at it. So Abacus isn't an ETF, it's the first company. It's a real estate company and the dividends are really consistent. So with such a high dividend yield, they're obviously getting their income from rent, from tenants and probably commercial tenants. So that's where all their money's coming from. But what have they done over the last 5 years in terms of price? Let's go and have a look. So over the last 5 years, they've actually increased 42%, although recently it looks like it's had a huge spike and it's falling again. So keep that in mind. That's probably something to do with the property sector overall. I'm not an expert in property, so I can't tell you exactly what that would be, but that's something to keep in mind. Let's look at CRN, Coronado Global Resources. Inconsistent dividends, like it's got a really high dividend yield, but the dividends are inconsistent. So do keep that in mind, although they've been all over the place over the last 4 years, as you can see. Like in 2020, they only paid once. In 2022, they paid 4 times. They must have had some special dividends during that year. Let's have a look at what it's done over the last 5 years. So it's actually decreased in price by 43%. So it doesn't look like it's strong in growth, even though the dividends are high. So keep that in mind also. So PLS, Pilbara Minerals. Let's go and have a look at the dividends first. So they've only paid in 2023, so they're brand new paying, even though the dividend yield says 19% here. So it could be, I'm filming this on a different day, so that's why the dividend yield might be looks different to when I did the search a few days ago. It's still a high dividend yield, but it's not the highest. They deal in lithium, so that's interesting. We haven't had a lithium one on this list yet. A lot of people are very interested in lithium at the moment, but let's have a look at what it's done over the last 5 years. It's actually increased by 356%. That is very interesting, although they've only started paying dividends now, and the dividend yield on Google says it's only 6.85%. So sometimes Comsex can be a little bit off, so I'd probably take the Google one as more accurate. HZN, Horizon Oil, let's go and look at that. So if we look at the dividends of Horizon Oil, they've only recently started paying, and even though the dividend yield is 23.3%, I can't see that they'll be sustainable, especially as they're only starting to pay dividends, and that's probably to attract investors in oil and gas exploration in New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and China. And what about the growth over the last 5 years? They have increased in a little bit. They've gone up by 8.57%, and it does look like it's on an upturn, so that might be interesting. It wouldn't be a company I'm interested in only because they haven't got consistent dividends and they haven't been paying for it long enough for me to know what they're going to be like. But if you're looking for something speculative, maybe, I don't know, but probably not. Let's go to OOO, which is such a funny stock code. Okay, it's Beta Shares Crude Oil Index. A lot of materials and resources companies. It's hedged over the exposure of crude oil. So there you go. And let's have a look at the distributions. They haven't been paying for very long. 2022 looked like they paid really, really well. Although here, even though it says the distribution yield is 41.7%, they haven't actually paid in 2023, which is interesting. So I'd have to go into the announcements to see why they haven't paid in 2023. The last payment was over a year ago, so it's not consistent in paying. So I would discount that distributions yield as being so high because it's obviously based on the current price. And my guess, even though I haven't looked yet, is that the price has decreased, which is why it looks so high. But let's go and have a look. Yep, it's down 67%. Makes complete sense why they're not paying dividends and why the dividend yield or the distribution yield looks so inflated. So there you go. TER, Terracom Limited. Let's go and have a look at that. So Terracom is an energy company, so that's interesting. Let's have a look at the dividends first. They've only started paying inconsistently since 2019, and they paid twice in 2022 and 3 times so far in 2023. Interesting. I'm guessing one of those would be a special dividend, but yeah, not consistent enough for dividends. What do they say the company does? It's an energy company. They're in coal again, so there you go. So let's see how they've done over the last 5 years. My guess is that they've also fallen. Let's see if I'm correct. 5 years. Yep, dropped. So it's down 39%. So yeah, it's fallen also in price over the last 5 years. Looked like it peaked around the end of 2022 and then it's since fallen. So a lot of these high dividend companies, that's why the dividend yield looks so high. So let's go to the one that was highest on my research when I pulled that list a couple of days ago. And let's see if it's still the same. Let's see if it's still over 50%, because that could change based on what the price is currently. So BSE, Base Resources, Materials again, not that surprising. Let's go and have a look at the dividends. Well, they have been fairly consistent with their dividends, and that dividend yield is currently showing as 86.2%, which is crazy. I'm guessing that's because the price has decreased since I last looked at the list. 86.2% dividend yield. That's crazy. That is really, really high. Let's go and have a look. I am guessing because the dividend yield is so high that the price has fallen over the last 5 years. Yep, knew it. So yeah, it's down 54%. So even though you might be getting a nice dividend yield, you'll be plummeting on the price. It's only a 12-cent stock, which means it's probably not that popular. And as you can see, Google's saying that the dividend yield is 36%, which is still super high. Comsec does have a little bit of an interesting way of calculating their dividend yield. For companies that are really stable, they're right on point, but companies that can be fluctuating quite a lot, the easiest way to calculate dividend yield is on the current price, and sometimes Comsec averages out that price, whereas most other people just use the price that it currently is right now. But those are the companies that have the highest dividend yields listed on the stock exchange through Comsec, so take their dividend yields with a grain of salt. I might actually repeat this with getting the dividend yields from, say, somewhere like a market index, which has a very more consistent dividend yield, I would say. But yeah, I thought it would be interesting anyway to have a look at which companies, the top 10 companies that had the highest dividend yields.